Speaking of a future, at most only decades away, an experimenter in intelligence control asserted, quote, I foresee a time when we shall have the means and therefore inevitably the temptation to manipulate the behavior and intellectual functioning of all the people through environmental and biochemical manipulation of the brain. Zbigniew Brzezinski from his book Between Two Ages, America's Role in the Technotronic Era, 1970, 50 years ago. Mr. Brzezinski went on to say, shortly, the public will be unable to reason or think for themselves. They'll only be able to parrot the information they've been given on the previous night's news. This was 1972. What Mr. Brzezinski could not have foreseen is a public no longer able to think at all, not just for themselves or otherwise. What you see on social media these days and what you see in the quote-unquote news is simply people reacting emotionally and expressing their feelings about things. It has very little to do with actual facts. Thought doesn't enter into the equation at all. Now, for those of you who hear the name Brzezinski and it rings a bell, this is the man's daughter. And here is a moment in time where she actually got caught unguarded telling the truth. Speaking of the previous president, he is trying to undermine the media and trying to make up his own facts. And it could be that while unemployment and the economy worsens, he could have undermined the messaging so much that he can actually control exactly what people, quote unquote, think. And that is our job. This is an exact quote from Mika Brzezinski, one of the co-hosts of Morning Joe over on MSNBC. Now, once again, they are making a mistake in believing that anyone listening to them, either side, is thinking. Very few people these days are. Because if they were, all they would have to do is walk outside, look at their air conditioner, and realize evolution can't possibly be true. Now, I'm sure some of you are wondering, pardon me, some of you are wondering, what does an air conditioner have to do with evolution? It's just that thing that sits outside and kicks on when my house gets too hot and makes noise. The second law of thermodynamics applies to air conditioning. Why? Because that unit has to set outside your house. Why is it you can put a heater inside your house and warm your home, but to cool your home, the unit responsible for it has to be outside? Why is that the case? Entropy. Randomness or disorder of the universe is always increasing. Put simply, heat flows toward cold, not the other way around. That's why your air conditioner unit has to be outside, but a heater can be inside. Now, I know this is kind of jumping around, but this is absolutely relevant. This is from 3 days ago. A megacomet, one so big it was previously misidentified as a dwarf planet, is approaching our solar system. Imagine that. Imagine everybody who knows anything about what's going on in the universe being completely wrong. Once again, about things that they were absolutely cocksure of 6 months ago. This was a dwarf planet. Oh, wait, no, now it's a comet. You see, it shows you something. It shows you that they're guessing. And they need you to believe that they know what they're talking about. Because if you didn't, you might begin thinking for yourself again. Now, I'm sure a lot of you are asking, okay, great, fantastic, Mucky. You mentioned something about evolution. You see, here's the problem with their story about evolution, is that evolution would be the exact opposite of the second law of thermodynamics. There's no way our planet would have gone from Pangea, a giant, huge, single continent rainforest, to what we see today. I showed this in yesterday's video, and I want to go over it again because it's very important for people to understand this. What they're alleging is 200 million years ago, one giant continent, lush trees and rainforests, and growth and life and all this kind of stuff. 3/4 of the planet, the entire other side, is all water. And then it just breaks up with no real explanation of how or why. And as it does so, order comes out of disorder. How can order come out of disorder unless something else is acting on it? This would have never happened this way. The first problem with the entire story is if 3/4 of the planet was covered with water on one side and all the land was on the other because of the moon, there would be giant tsunamis slamming into both sides of that giant supercontinent literally continually all the time. Plus, there would be no rain in the center. Therefore, no life. Therefore, no giant rainforests. Therefore, everything falls apart. It would have never happened that way. What I was showing with this image here is the haline cycle. The haline cycle is responsible for the world we know today. Period. What that is basically is salt water is heavier, and as it gets cooler, it sinks, and it flows southward down toward the equator. It causes, of course, then water on the surface to move northward, bringing with it all of the warm air from the center of the planet, causing Great Britain and Scotland and Ireland to experience temperatures much more on par with the east coast of the United States, even though their latitude is North Canada. A lot of people think that when they came to this hemisphere back in 1500s and 1600s, they were sailing west. They weren't. They were sailing south. To get to where they were going from England all the way down to what we call the Caribbean, that's pretty much south. And as far as there being no rain, even when they explain how rain occurs and what happens with clouds, the reason Nevada is a desert and California has all sorts of agriculture is because of the mountains. As the clouds come off the Pacific, they reach the mountains. They have to get over the mountains, they have to rise and they have to shed that water, the rains. That's why on the western side of California, or I should say the eastern part of that state, but west of the California line, you have this huge valley that they grow everything in. And then right across the mountains, you have Nevada and Utah and this completely parched desert because they don't get any rain, because all the water's been shed on the other side. It's all thermodynamics. It is all thermodynamics. Basic, fundamental, immutable laws that the universe does not go from disorder to order. It goes the other way around. Always. It never gains order. It might stay the same for a certain amount of time, but it will never go the other direction. And it's just as simple as heating and air conditioning. The air conditioner has to be outside. That heat has to be removed. Whereas the cold in your house doesn't have to be removed. You can buy a space heater. You can plug it into the wall. And the room gets warm. All contained. The walls of your house are a closed system. Why should that be the truth? It goes back to this: control. They'll never have it. And this is where a lot of people are going to disagree with me, because these people don't recognize themselves as being part of the system they're trying to control. They believe that they've elevated themselves out of it, but they still sleep at night, and they still get up, and they need heat, and they need air conditioning, and they need food, and they need clothes, and they need cars to drive around in, and they need grocery stores, and they need everything you and I need. They're part of the system that they think they control, when we know who actually is in control above. And that's how you can learn evolution is bunk, simply by looking at your air conditioner. Something on the outside made the earth what the earth is. Antarctica would not be Antarctica unless there was intervention. That we have high tides and low tides, that we have fertile farm ground to plant things in, the way we can move around, continents split up by oceans, lakes, rivers, streams, ponds, seasons for growing, seasons for harvesting, seasons for planting. That's not what nature does on its own. That's not what the universe does on its own. Venus and Mars, 500 years ago, 5,000 years ago, were lifeless, uninhabitable rocks. And they will be lifeless, uninhabitable rocks 5,000 years from now, unless acted upon by an outside force. And we all know who that force is. He's outlined in a book called the Bible. And many have come to this conclusion, and they have been silenced, but that doesn't change the truth. It doesn't change the truth. Meteors can hit, and life goes on. Comets can come and show up in our skies, and people read all sorts of stuff into it. Some have even hit the planet. But life goes on, because people who believe they are in control are part of the same system they think they're controlling from the outside in. And I'll leave it there. God bless. Like, share, subscribe, and we will see you guys later on.